President Tinubu affirmed support for a robust public-private sector partnership to grow the economy.
Looking forward, I give you on the lips that will oppress you.
House of Representatives summons acting central bank governor over status of National Housing Fund.
They should tell us how much they have collected or deducted on this investment.
Nigeria police gets assurance of adequate funding for operations.
We have let them know our challenges. We have also presented an overview of the dynamics of crime.
On Good Morning Nigeria today, we shall examine new fees in universities.
All right, just shortly after the fuel subsidy removal, many federal universities increased their fees, a development that has left many parents groaning.
Now, for instance, according to a number of reports, the University of Lagos, University of Maiduguri, University of Benin, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa University in Bauchi, and Usman Danfodio University in Sokoto, among others, were said to have increased their range of fees. And of course, this is not talking about tuition fees. And the increases, in some cases, were up to about 100%.
And many Nigerians, again, linked the decision to increase the school fees at the universities to the removal of the petroleum subsidy. Again, it coincided with, of course, when the removal of the subsidy increased the prices of commodities across the country.
Now, the Vice Chancellor of Wesley University in Ondo State, Professor Sondo Becker, said that instead of increasing fees, the expectation was that federal universities, for instance, through appropriate unions, would have addressed the issue of fuel subsidy removal and the realities of the proposed palliative measures, which the government said would ultimately alleviate the suffering of Nigerians.
He was not alone. There were also other voices to that effect, but the presidency, through the then special advisor to the president on special duties and communication strategy, Dele Alaki, on July the 26th, reacted and insisted that federal universities remain tuition-free. Now, that counters the reports that were widely circulated then across some media outlets that the federal government had increased tuition fees in federal universities across the country.
Now, Dele Alake further said at the time that the reports, of course, were not a reflection of the true situation. According to him, the presidency was aware that some universities had in recent weeks announced increase in the amount payable by students on sundry charges. However, the fact remains that we have confirmed that these are discretionary charges by each university for hostel accommodation, registration, laboratory, and other charges. They are not tuition fees, unquote, according to Dele Alake.
So what is the true situation? And another question we will be asking is why do universities increase fees, and some say arbitrarily? So we shall be looking at these questions and much more as we take on new fees in universities and other matters arising on today's edition of Good Morning Nigeria. It's a Friday's edition and it always puts smiles on our faces. So wherever you're watching from, I welcome you to the program. I am Claire Adilabu Abdurazak.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I joined my colleague Claire to also welcome you to the program. As she has indicated, we'll be having a conversation around the increase in the charges of fees paid in a number of universities, more particularly federal universities, and whether the pre-existing fees, that's before the increases, were realistic in properly governing the various institutions. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and the very first in the month of September. of course, the last for this week. We welcome you to the program, reaching you on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority from our nation's headquarters studios in Abuja. We'll take the highlights of the morning news shortly, then thereafter business news and newspaper review will follow. Here is Elizabeth Omori, who has the news. Good morning, Lizzie.
Good morning, Claire and Kingsley, and here is the morning news. President Bola Tinubu reaffirms his support for a robust public-private sector partnership to grow the economy. Says his administration's sustained, bold and coordinated reforms are anchored on strong adherence to accountability and transparency. Speaking at an audience with members of the board and management of the Nigeria Economic Support Group at the State House, the President reiterated his resolve to fully implement the 8 priority reform areas under the Renewed Hope agenda within the next 3 years.
We must kill our advantages in the economic path. And so we must kill it. The world is dynamic, the environment is dynamic as well. We are confronted with climate change and many other challenges.
And President Bola Tinubu is asking religious leaders to intensify national reorientation of the Nigeria people towards strengthening the bond of unity in the country. The President said this when he received members of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs, led by Sultan Mohammed Saad Abubakar, who is the President General of the Council.
Is here to pay a courtesy call on Mr. President, to appreciate him for what he's doing for the nation, and to also advise him as to what the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs feels should be done.
The federal government is reassessing the state of affairs in the north with a view to coming up with robust platforms to address the challenges in the region. Vice President Kashim Shettima stated this when he received coalition of Northern States Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture, led by its president, Dalhatu Abubakar.
Our loyalty, our support to this administration is 100%. 100% with this government, and we are there in support of all their aspirations, all the good things that they have laid out for this country.
Meanwhile, the Vice President urges friends and political allies to refrain from placing birthday wishes on newspaper pages, utilizing paid channels to convey greetings in endeavors to commemorate his birthday. A press statement personally signed by the Vice President, who will turn 57 on September the 2nd, says that the decision was made in the spirit of the nation's commitment to responsible resource management and responsive governance. He urges everyone willing to contribute to the betterment of society to donate to charity organizations in the collective pursuit of a functional world. In other news, the House of Representatives has summoned the acting governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria to appear before it to give an account of the value and status of the National Housing Funds domiciled in the Apex Bank from 2011 till date. At the resumed hearing of the header committee investigating the utilization of the funds, members emphasized that the Apex Bank is empowered by law to make remittances to the fund at source from commercial banks.
The Central Bank of Nigeria shall, within 2 months of making the collection under subsection 1 of this Act, pay the money to the bank for investment in the funds. This is what we expect from CBN.
Now, the Minister of Police Affairs has assured the Nigeria Police Force that federal government is committed to providing adequate funding for police operations, procure equipment that meets specific needs and prioritize the welfare of officers and men. He gave the assurance when the leadership of the Nigeria Police briefed 2 ministers in Abuja.
Briefed the ministers on the general operations of the Nigerian Police Force. We have let them know our challenges. We have also presented an overview of the dynamics of crime.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu expresses his deepest condolences to the government and people of South Africa following a tragic fire incident at a multi-story building in Johannesburg's central business district. A statement by the special advisor, media and publicity to the president, Ajuri Ngelale, says, "In this moment of tragedy, Nigeria's thoughts and prayers are with the victims and their families affected by this devastating fire incident. The extent of this loss is truly devastating, and during this challenging time, Nigeria stands in unity with South Africa," the president said, while praying for speedy recovery for the wounded. Reiterating the strong bond shared between Nigeria and South Africa, President Tinubu expressed hope that the collective strength of the South African people, relevant government agencies, and the unwavering spirit of Africa will positively impact the healing and rehabilitation of all those affected. And that's the morning news. Good Morning Nigeria continues with Kingsley and Claire after this break. To stay with us.
Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria. If you're just tuning in, and quite on time for the business news. Now, federal government is planning mega fund generation through steel industry, and Indonesia seeks improved bilateral relations with Nigeria. For details of these and more, let's join Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
The federal government has emphasized its commitment to revamp the nation's steel sector to enhance the economy and create employment opportunities. The Minister of Steel Development, Prince Shuaib Audu, said this in Abuja when he met with heads of agencies and departments in the ministry. Audu says Nigeria's abundance in the sector can help reshape the nation's economic landscape by tapping into the latent potential of the steel sector and channeling it into lucrative ventures. In another development, the trade volume between Nigeria and Indonesia jumped by 83% to $4.78 billion in 2022 from $2.61 billion in 2021, underlining the huge trade potential between the two countries. Consolidating this, the Nigeria-Indonesia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, in collaboration with the Indonesia Trade Promotion and the Indonesia Embassy in Nigeria, have announced plans to host the 2023 Trade Expo Indonesia, TEI 2023. The TEI 2023, which is the 38th edition, is scheduled to hold between 18th and 22nd of October 2023 in the city of Tangerang in Indonesia. At an event, Indonesia Ambassador to Nigeria noted that TEI 2023 is pivotal to fostering international economic collaboration. Now let's take a look at Thursday tradings on the floor of the exchange. With business news, Alika Okpanachi Arwa.
Many thanks, Alika, for the business news package. Coming up next, newspaper review.
Time to welcome Chukwudi Baja, and he's in all white. Is it that it is the 1st of September? Are you a September baby?
No, I'm not. I'm Sagittarian. You know us. December 5. I'm Sagittarian. And you know what we are.
No, I don't know.
We're very, very robust, versatile people. Let me mention it. If I can get him a little jealous, but it's almost impossible. Hello, Kirian. Where is that man? You see? How are you, Kingsley?
He's not available.
He's not available. Let's push him out of our mind for now.
Well,
How are you?
there's an alliteration. KK.
The KK. Oh, it reminds me of Kenneth Ekperi. There was a day he was presenting a program on Radio Rivers. He said, I got one Kenneth on the show. I'm Kenneth as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a duo K presentation.
It's a duo K.
That was when DJing was DJing. Now, you better shut me up
All right.
we can.
All right. Mr. Kingsley, you
Let's
understand?
take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper. And, of course, two major stories are there on the front page. The disaster in South Africa yesterday, and, of course, the fallout of the spate of coups on the continent. The kicker for the lead story says, fear of coups. AU suspends Gabon as Cameroon and Rwanda retire generals and 1,000 soldiers. AU says suspension in force until democracy is restored, and Niger humanitarian crisis looms. Niger junta orders forceful eviction of French ambassador, cancels envoy and family visas. 12 children, over 60 others die in South Africa building fire. The details of that on page 8, and you see the charred remains of the structure there in downtown Johannesburg. And below those pictures says oil theft, Navy arrests Tompolo's men, security firm kicks. Tanker driver crushes 16-year-old Niger girl on Niger now. This is Niger State. That's the photograph of the governor. 16-year-old Niger girl to death. AGF and CBN governor threatened with arrest for shunning reps probe. Page 29. Very quickly, about the nameplate, airport expansion. Government to demolish multi-billion naira Lagos private jet terminals. Federal government to evict over 22 jets, and Keyamo relocates foreign airlines to new terminal. Federal government, states and local governments share 4.37 trillion naira in 6 months, according to NATI. Details on page 19. Claire.
All right, I think you've read almost all the stories, but just to take a few of the headlines from the Nation newspaper. And the headline, federal government holds Nigeria airports concession suspended foreign airlines to operate from new terminal in Lagos from October 1. And right inside there you have highlights of that story. That's the lead story from the Nation. Up above the nameplate, government's hammer to fall on illegal miners, says Minister. Page 5. DHQ, troops kill 39 terrorists in 2 weeks. And humanitarian ministry, do minister 15 million indigents to get federal government's cash transfer. Kaduna governor roadside plan for rural areas. And coming down the paper, just before the foot of the paper, AU suspends Gabon. Cameroon, Rwanda rejig military, and Tinubu, Niger junta can quit within 1 year. And the picture story there, you find the Senate President, or President of the Senate rather, Godswill Akpabio, and the Anambra State Governor Charles Soludo at the funeral mass in honor of late Senator Aniyanyu Konkwo in the Demile North local government area of Anambra State. And that event happened yesterday. And that's just the lookout from the Nation. But just before I bring in Chukwudi, there's also a story just in between the nameplate and the headline. It says Tinubu to deliver Nigeria's statement at UNGA on September 19. At UNGA, United Nations General Assembly. Chukwudi, over to you.
Thank you, Claire. Let me just push this in, otherwise I'll sound totally foreign in my approach today. Navy arrests Tompolo's man. Whatever it's all about, let them not work at cross purposes. That's the little advice we're putting in there. I didn't read the story at all, so let me not.
Is the
Tantita,
yes,
you know,
in charge of protecting some of the
pipelines.
In the
yes, so whatever it is, please let them handle it properly for the sake of Nigeria. Okay. The fear of coups, AU suspends Gabon as Cameroon, Rwanda retired generals, 1,000 soldiers. This came as Rwanda and Cameroon hurriedly retired their 1,029 senior officers in a surprise move against their respective, militaries. The Rwandan authorities approved the retirement of 12 generals, including 2 4-star generals, James Kabarebe, Fred Ibigira, 2 3-star generals, Charles Koyonga, Frank Mushio, Kamanzi, and several other officers. Let's not disclose everything. But in Cameroon, President Paul Biya reshuffled the military with new appointments to the Control General des Armées. Okay? Fine. The point being made here is it panic action? Is it that the gale of, because it's fast becoming a gale now, of coups is shaking these people? Remember that in spite of the fact that Paul Kagame proverbially brought, peace to Rwanda after the Tutsi Hutu clashes that left us so many people dead. In spite of that, people are saying he's beginning to show signs of a Sithitism and all that.
Relapsing.
Yes. But Rwanda still happens to be the destination for many good things in Africa. Yes. It should happen in Nigeria as well. Yes, so we'll get there. That's a beautiful slip of the tongue.
Just before you leave that, we had one of the governors, who went to Kigali for retreat. That's the governor of Nasarawa State. He was on Good Morning Nigeria and gave us insight into the outcome of, their visiting Rwanda for the retreat. And one thing he said, which is very, very fundamental, also for me and also for the executive governor, is the fact that he had met someone, in a coach they were in, and he jokingly asked about the Tutsis and the Hutus, and the person said, look, in Rwanda today there are no more Hutus and no more Tutsis.
It's a feat.
Yes.
It's a feat.
And that
1994 genocide, I mean,
yes,
the world will not forget it.
And that is one thing I always preach. When we go out of this country, we talk as Nigerian.
That's it. That's it.
First and foremost.
Very important.
You see someone, even you don't know where the person is dark in color, you assume the person is a Nigerian. The first question you probably is, hi, oh, are you a Nigerian? Mm-hmm. And it brings joy when you go outside and you talk about your country. But when we come here,
I hear South African ladies like Nigerian men, they say they're very caring. Anyway, that's another
I think that,
angle to it.
In terms of the instability in parts of the continent,
yes,
there are pertinent issues to also pursue. You remember we touched on this yesterday during the newspaper review, and it was a subject matter of our conversation. Well, African leaders, some of these knee-jerk reactions, you're retiring generals, retiring soldiers, if there is discontent within, address the sources of the discontent. It is well fine, you're retiring generals, retiring soldiers in the meantime, but if you do not address the grievances of the people and make life happier and much better for them, the contagion just might continue.
Exactly. You have not taken the final solution.
That's why. And let's remember. Probably that was one of the sources of longevity of Nigeria's instant Fourth Republic. In 1999, after President Olusegun Obasanjo came into office, one of the measures that the government took at the time, and it was decisive, it was to say all soldiers who were still in service, Air Force, Navy, or whatever, if you had held any political appointment as governor or advisor or ADC, they were all compulsorily retired. Because the argument then was, oh, don't contaminate the rest, because Lieutenant General Saliu Ibrahim, may so rest in peace, who was Chief of Army Staff, had referred to some of the cadre as cowboys, who were always interested in political intervention rather than their military function. So that happened for us. Yes. And I was in 1999, it was like clearing the entire deck officers, military officers, who had held political appointments, and those, of course, who were also in the police, because you used to have police persons, who were also, everybody just went, so that there would be no question of talking around. But more significantly, for the case of Rwanda, I think that we should, I always have this title in my head. There was a book that was written after Mandela became ANC president and president of South Africa. It said, when Mandela goes, or after Mandela goes, what happens? After Paul Kagame, what happens?
There must be the succession plan?
Absolutely. So that
a big problem.
So that the gains that have been recorded in that country after the horrors of the genocide will be sustained. You can see the orderly transition, for instance, in Namibia. Sam Nujoma, quietly, and they've been independent for the past 33 years. Orderly succession. It must be that none of us is going to live forever.
I always like to refer to ECOWAS, and that's somewhere, when things like this happen, people always refer to ECOWAS, forgetting that there are certain African countries that are not, members of the ECOWAS community. But ECOWAS has an article and a supplementary protocol which deals with, one, ensuring constitutional, takeover of government, and two, promoting good governance. And I just like to read that section. I think it's found in section 1, and it says it's the supplementary protocol on the consensus of the ECOWAS member states that every accession to power must be made through free, fair, and transparent elections. Zero tolerance to power obtained or maintained by unconstitutional means. Popular participation in decision making. And the supplementary protocol on good governance is talking about the need to achieve peace and security through development of democracy and good governance. Now, this is what member countries should be happy on. Once you do that, the issue of coup d'etat, violent clashes will be minimized. But where people are not happy, and where you find, the electioneering process is faulted, where you have the high poverty level, this is what you find.
Yes, that's what we find. But the question we ask eventually is, which African country has really benefited from military rule? The Rawlings, successes were quite qualified. I mean, they were not, at the point actually regretted shooting those 5 former heads of state. So military rule, I think, is not the answer. Let Africa sit down and think a way out of the logjam.
Which said that democracy must have meaning.
Yes.
And it must have content. And the abuses that we have seen in some African countries of the tenets of democracy must not stand.
Exactly.
People just, they wango their constitutions, you extend your tenure.
Yes.
And look at what is happening in Cote d'Ivoire. You wango your constitution to perpetuate yourself in office.
Almost setting up a monarchy.
And then people will react. Elsewhere, where you have real contestation in terms of opposition and ruling parties, where the system is stable. But the key thing is, democracy should not be taken for granted.
Yes.
You have to keep at it. You have to keep working at it, and then be delivering the public goods that are the ends of democracy.
Let's find a way of holding them accountable.
The world is dynamic.
Yes.
Every era has something new, throws in something new.
Yes.
We have passed through stages where military or rule was fashionable, where the interest of the state is military power and might. But transformation has gone, and now we are into economic power and wealth creation.
Wealth creation.
Yes, that's where we are now.
Development of national, concerns and all that.
Precisely.
For the good of the...
Chukudi, are you itching for another subject?
No, actually, I wanted to quickly mention the morbid reports from South Africa concerning the fire. But I don't think we have time for that. They say the building
pretty sad.
was occupied by squatters,
Yeah, by squatters.
In the central Johannesburg incident, 61 people got injured in it, about 12 children died, 60 others also died, But the one I quickly wanted to add to is that there could be a Nigerian angle to the discovery of a body in northern Tinshire, as police in the UK find a body during search for missing Nigerian poet Boyega Odubanjo, who went missing during a music festival. He was billed to perform at this festival. There is no identification yet, but people are feeling more and more pessimistic, concerning the possibility of this being found alive. Let's hope that a miracle happens.
Well, we just hope so, and our hearts, of course, remain with the members of the family and its associates. Yesterday, we carried over the issue of the flag designer who passed away at 87. May his soul rest in peace. But very quickly, before we wrap this up, there was a story, we didn't have time to touch on it yesterday. The new Minister of Works, Senator David Umahi, was in the Senate for only a few days, former governor of Ebonyi, said something during his visit to the southwest of the country. He said that now that they are going to introduce the concept of night work in fixing roads. And this is an issue that we have neglected for a long time. Look, how many years has it taken to work on Lagos-Ibadan, particularly the Section 2 of it? It's taken almost forever. And you go to other places. There was a time they were working on Ijebu-Ode or and parts of somewhere around Ajebandele. They work for only a few hours during the daytime and they plead their security concerns, and then everybody leaves. Why don't you throw a security cordon around the
cordon?
A cordon.
Exactly.
I mean, you have the police, you have the civil defense, you have the military. And if they work, you will reduce the pressure. You will also reduce the losses of man hours on motorists, because sometimes when you are on those roads, I tell you, it's horrific. And you know the impact it has on the health of motorists themselves. So a project that ordinarily shouldn't take more than a year or 2 years, dragging for 5 years, 6 years, and so on and so forth. So if they reintroduce it, I think that would be a great thing. And you have to get these contractors to do the work and not keep very contract sums.
Kingsley and Chukudi, there are so many things to talk about today. Again, the Nigeria Air that has been halted, but we've spent our time for this session.
Yeah, we'll put it away, but Nigerians ought to know what happened, why they brought in an Ethiopian airliner painted in the livery of Nigeria Air, whatever name it was called, and declared that the carrier had arrived.
Yeah, there are other platforms for that.
See you. Have a beautiful weekend, Chukudi, and we'll see you here Monday by God's grace. All right, let's take a short break now, and we come back. We'll continue our conversation.
Watching Good Morning Nigeria, the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, before we commence our conversation, which is on the range of fees or charges in universities, let's listen to the background put together by our correspondent, Joseph Otsen.
Few months ago, some federal government universities increased fees to be paid by students, some with more than 100% increment. Institutions reported to be affected include University of Lagos, University of Maiduguri, Borno State, University of Benin, Edo State, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, Bauchi State, Usman Dan Fodio University, Sokoto, among others. Actions taken by these institutions stormed parents and students who grumble as they see the idea as insensitive to plight of the masses struggling to cope with rising costs of goods and services. Even as the Nigerian universities are also bearing the brunt of the hike exacerbated by removal of petrol subsidy, many feel the timing is not just right and want the universities to revert. While the public outcry continues, government came out to clear the air on the matter, saying federal government-owned universities remain tuition-free, describing fillers in the media as incorrect. The increased fees, the government said, are discretionary charges by universities for hostel accommodation, registration, laboratory, and other charges, and not tuition fees. The hope is that the Student Loan Act, recently signed by President Bola Tinubu, if implemented, will support students cope with much of the demands, but many ponder if significant number of them in need of the facility can actually meet the conditions set. Whether discretionary charges or tuition fees, the fact remains that the rise is taking the huge toll on parents and students who are looking up to the government to come up with measures that will reduce the economic burden on them. Good Morning Nigeria will take a look at the new fees in Nigerian universities and the consequences on the education sector.
All right, indeed, we're certainly set to look at the new charges in Nigerian universities and consequences on the students, the parents, and of course on the economy as well. Thank you very much, Joseph, for compiling that background for us. So our guests are all seated and ready for us. Let me start with introductions. And we have right here in our Abuja studio Professor Mohammed Mainoma. He is a familiar face, although he's been here for, he's not been here for a long while. He's former Vice Chancellor, Nasarawa State University, Kefi in Nasarawa State. He's also the Vice Chancellor now, Prime University, Abuja. Good to see you, Professor.
Good morning.
It's been a long while. Thank you for coming. Also here with us in Abuja is a beautiful lady, one of the youngest professors we have, female professors, Professor Aisha Sane Maikudi, Deputy Vice Chancellor, University of Abuja, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics, University of Abuja. Professor Maikudi, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
And also with us from our Ibadan Network Center, we'll be joined by Samuel Tobiloba Samson. Tobiloba Samson is the President, Student Union Government of the University of Ibadan. Tobiloba Samson, good to have you with us.
Good morning, and it's good to be here.
All right, we have two other guests who are joining us virtually. From Imo State, we have Professor Yakubu Ochefu. Professor Yakubu Ochefu, a regular on Good Morning Nigeria, he's Secretary General, Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities. And it's also the Secretary General of the Committee of Pro-Chancellors of Federal Universities in the country. Professor Ochefu, we're glad to have you this morning.
Good morning. Morning, and I'm very happy to be here.
Okay, and joining us also via Zoom from Abia State, would like to welcome a very well-known face, Professor Emmanuel Oshodeke. He's President, Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU. Professor Oshodeke, we're glad to have you on our program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Okay, let's begin the conversation. The Zoom connections are pretty good at the moment, so let's begin the conversation with Professor Yakubu Ochefu, who is the Secretary General Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities. It was in the news, and of course it's still in the news, as to what is happening with respect to fees, and this more particularly concerning federal universities, to the extent that the then special advisor to the president, Dele Alake, who's moved upstairs now as a minister of the Federal Republic, had to issue a statement to say that federal universities remained tuition-free. But then there was a raft of other charges that universities had introduced. Kindly let us know what is happening exactly with respect to fees before we get into the justification for those fees, if any.
Yeah, what is happening is that against the backdrop of rising cost of goods and services, the user charges that universities deploy for students for maintenance and support services, especially municipal services, light, water, internet access, hospital services, all of those costs have gone up by about 300%. And if you analyze the university finances, these are the major cost centers for universities, especially municipal and maintenance services. And given the general rise in costs and the poor state of funding for universities, especially public universities, it became imperative for the vice chancellors to share a greater part of that cost with students. And so what you have seen is, for example, cost of diesel has gone up. So if you are going to run generators for even 6 hours a day, these costs have gone up significantly. And the burden has fallen on our students and their parents. But this is just the stark reality. It was either these costs were increased or federal government increased its subvention to manage these municipal services, or the universities will have to shut down. So that is the situation which most of the public universities have found themselves against the backdrop of the cost that we are talking about.
Professor Ochefu, joining us from Imo State there. Let me bring in Tobiloba Samson, who is the president of the Student Union Government in the University of Ibadan. Tobiloba, I would like you to share with us your, and by extension, your fellow students' experience in terms of fees and charges in the university.
I think it's good for us to say that in Nigeria that we are having tuition-free experience, which is not bad, at least for a country where more than 50% of people living here do not even have means of livelihood or cannot live up to the normal standard of their colleagues elsewhere in the world. And education, we all agree, is the way out of poverty, is the way out of a whole lot of things. So it's good that we support ourselves towards education. But then, many a times we are told that we are having tuition-free experience and all. But in the real sense of it, I don't believe that what we currently practice in Nigeria is tuition-free. Because in essence, we still pay a considerable high amount when you compare that to the amount that we are the minimum wage that we have in the country. If you compare what we have, for example, someone that is earning the minimum wage of about 30 to 35,000 naira cannot send his or her child to university in Nigeria. That's the reality. So, and when you look at all of these things, it's also agreed that we are not paying much, but in a sense, we pay with our time too. Many a times we go on strike for 8 months, for 6 months, and all. And whether you like it or not, these are times that we can quantify in terms of value. And if we have an alternative for us to be able to save this time, of course, we are also saving time and we are saving resources and we are also making monetary contribution. So in essence, as a student union president and as students of University of Ibadan, and I want to believe that I'm speaking for other students, we don't believe that what we have in the country is tuition free. Thank you.
Samuel, thank you for your opening remarks. But I wanted you to, just give us an idea so that we understand, the scenario in University of Ibadan. Apart from your tuition, what other fees are students made to pay? For instance, like accommodation, your hostels and all that. Are there other charges, that are put together that you have to pay for?
Thank you very much. Yes, in University of Ibadan, we have what we have called the basic fee, which students pay. And aside the basic fee, we have the accommodation, of course, for people that stay in the various halls of residence. And aside that, we have the technology levy that people pay. And of course, in recent time, the utility levy that students have had to pay because of the need to cater for the cost of power supply and other utility needs of the universities. And those are the major bills. And I want to believe that aside that, no other faculty or department is charging, because in essence, it is important that we prioritize central means of charging. So I want to believe that no other charges is being paid as of today. Thank you.
Samuel, I still want to stay with you. Can you assign figures to some of the heads that you've been referring to? You talk about, for instance, accommodation. How much do students pay for accommodation in the official halls of residence?
For accommodation in official halls of residence, we pay between 45,000 and 60,000 naira, at least at the undergraduate level. While at the postgraduate level, people pay more than that. Then the technology levy is 10,000 naira. I think those are the major ones.
45,000 naira for accommodation, that's per session, or the technological levy or tech levy for short, it's also per session, I imagine. What other charges are there that you are supposed to pay? That you say, for instance, you're arguing that education is not tuition free. So what other charges are there and how much are they?
Thank you. For me, as a medical student, I pay professional levy of 100,000 naira. Aside that, I pay utility levy. I was just telling my colleague before getting here that when I put everything that I'm supposed to pay together, I will be paying as much as 300,000 naira this session. And that is a whole lot of money. And when you compare that with the current reality of the country.
Okay, thank you very much, Samson, for your explanation. As a medical student, you say that's the combined charges you pay will be about 300,000. We'll come to crunching the numbers as well as the services and facilities that are available and what students also expect. Let's bring in the Deputy Vice Chancellor of University of Abuja, Professor Aisha Maikudi. Maikudi, that's the owner of money. So, Maikudi, so University of Abuja has money. There's no need for you to charge anything. So tell us, what's the situation with your institution?
It's the same all over with all federal institutions. We're owned by the government, as you're aware, and we get a subvention. However, that subvention is not enough to run the university. It's the current realities, and it's all over the world. It's not just in Nigeria or just in Abuja. We all know that inflation has gone up everywhere. If you bought a bag of rice for, let's say, 20,000, it's now 40,000. So when you go to the market, what can you say? Do you say, oh, you have to collect that 20,000 for the same amount of rice? You can't do that. And that's the current reality we're dealing with. So all our charges have gone up. All the people that provide services for us have increased their charges. So that means we also have to find a way to pay for those services, because if we don't pay for those services, then the universities will have to close down. They'll have to be shut down. And that's why we had to increase those charges. However, there's no tuition that is being paid. Those are necessary charges, and our accommodation is actually, very reasonable. It's just 30,000 naira. You can't get accommodation outside the university at that rate. So they're very, very reasonable, and they're just the bare minimum that we can, that we're charging. We're charging the very, very bare minimum. We need to stay afloat to survive. Without that, we'll be shut down.
30,000 per session per student for accommodation.
Yes.
What other charges are there?
Well, not all students are accommodated at the university, as you're aware. So they pay like 1,000 for counseling, then they pay some electricity charges as well. Just a few charges, lab or maybe field trips. For example, I'm from the Faculty of Law, and so our students pay the clinician fee, which is just about 2,000. It has been now increased to 5,000, and so they use that for their law clinicals, and they've been doing a lot of good with that. For example, they were part of the prison outreach here in Kuje, and they were able to get many people freed. But it wasn't just the University of Abuja, it was a collaboration with other universities and some in the US as well. So it's being put to good use, and every kobo collected is being accounted for. And the university still has to subsidize that. So it's not even enough.
Okay. Professor Mainoma, I'm glad you've occupied, the position of a VC and now, of course, a Vice Chancellor, Nasarawa State University, and now Prime University. I'll just take my question from what Tobiloba said. He said there really is no tuition free in Nigerian universities. That's if you incorporate all the charges, he's put together. Is there really tuition free in federal universities?
Yes, the government has declared severally that people are not going to pay tuition. What that means is that you are not going to pay for purposes of getting the education you are getting, but you are going to pay for other services that are not, like for instance, you are not going to pay in order to pay the teachers, you are not going to pay in order to get the kind of education you are supposed to get. But if there are services that you are going to be given, those services you are going to pay for them. Like if you are going to stay in hostels, you will pay. If you are going to look for food, you will pay. If you are going to
use electricity, you pay.
You pay. Of course, it's part of the accommodation. I don't know why they are doing light and water separately. It should be part and parcel of the accommodation fee.
And if you are going to use the IT
maybe at IT center, you will pay. If you are going to do laboratory, you pay. Those are the kind of things that they. But to me, I think we need to look at education as an investment instead of as an expense. And that is where, you see, when you want to develop human capital, you think of how you can be able to raise people that are going to also be part and parcel of the development of the nation. And that is where we are missing the point. The idea that you just wake up and say that something should happen, that's what is disturbing the system. If we are to plan properly that, okay, for the next 5 years, government is going to be doing this, but people are going to prepare that in maybe 27, there's going to be a new regime that is going to do ABCD. Then people are going to plan their system in such a way that they can come up with that. But you just wake up one morning and for a lecturer in the university, if you have 2 children in the university, you cannot pay their charges that they're talking about for the 2 students. So what do? You are a senior lecturer in the university, you are paid 300,000, and your own children are in the university, in the federal government university, and they are asked to pay 150,000 naira each. Or they are asked to pay 300,000 naira each. And for you to save 300,000, it will take you about 3 years. So there is a problem. You see, in other climes, you find that they structure the issue of what to pay, what not to pay as per educational matter in different ways. There is what they call either deferred payment, or there is what they call upfront payment, or there is what they call the free work or sliding scale, or what they call dual track. That at the end of the day, you know which regime is operational, and you plan to get your child educated. There is something wrong in saying that people should pay for the services but make it in such a way that it is planned in a manner that people can pay for it. But you just wake up, the regime that has been operational is that people are paying maybe 30,000 naira as accommodation fee. 2 weeks to going to school, you now say people should bring 100,000 naira. That is where the problem is. If you are going to plan it in such a way that, and structure it in such a way that, see, when I was vice chancellor, we wanted in a state university, we wanted to increase fees, these charges and all that. And the governor was saying, no, there is problem, and the amount of money that we cannot. I said, okay, I know what to do. What I'm going to do is that every student that is already a student in the school will graduate with his fees. But if a new student is coming in, we'll give you a notice that this is what is going to be your fees. And you also take that and you graduate with it. That way we are able to have a stable system. And in Nasarawa State University, for all the 5 years I was vice chancellor, there was no argument as to whether people are going to pay this amount or they are not going to pay that amount. Because we planned it in such a way that when you come in, the fee you made, it is the one that you are going to graduate with.
Prof,
in other words, you keep paying the same fees all through, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, Professor Benoma, you're an accountant. That is understandable. You are speaking this way, but there are persons who are also arguing, because it appears that the contention is more with federal universities. There's virtually no state in the federation today that doesn't have a state university, if I'm not mistaken. There's no state.
No.
From your experience as Vice Chancellor of a state-owned university, why is it that these arguments are not rife in state-owned universities as to the fee structure?
No, it is there in some other state universities. The truth of the matter is that, you see, even in the state universities, they are also free tuition, and they have these charges. But because some of the state universities have started with a slightly higher fee than the federal universities, so they are still able to accommodate some of these increases without asking for the students to pay additional. And also, some of the state governments are also in a position to say that, okay, I have taken over some of these charges. But in the case of federal government, they are still in the old regime.
Old regime of
what government is given to the universities.
The old regime of subvention.
Subvention, yes.
Okay, Prof, I was going to ask you, it will appear that we've caught within a kind of cycle, in the sense that at the moment, because what the prompt for this conversation is the recent, hike in certain charges in some universities across the country, within this period of economic crunch that a lot of Nigerians are going through, biting hard times. Workers have their salaries, still, the same amount.
Yeah.
No salary increase and all that. Cost of, food and other items skyrocketing in the marketplace, and people can't even, get enough to eat. And here we are. Universities are increasing their charges, increasing charges for using electricity, increasing charges for accessing technology, increasing charges for accommodations. Yet you go to some of those universities, the hostels they don't have doors. You go to this. So, what could be the rationale for increasing those charges at this point in time?
Yes.
Is there a plausible reason?
Of course, the argument is clear. From the point of view of those that are increasing, we have increased amount of money to pay, and we don't have a source that is increasing. So we have to go back to the users to pay. That is the basic reason. But for me, I would say that is where the intervention of government is also very necessary. You see, some of the conditions are matters that are brought about by government. And if these things were thought out clearly, government should have been in a position to say that we know that this is going to bring this kind of a thing. So this is some level of cushioning that we can do in order to make a reduced burden on those that are affected. It doesn't take any difficulty. The government is having increased resource as a result of these conditions. So they should also be able to say that, okay, because of that, we are also sending this much to the universities so that they will be able to pay for some of these services. But unfortunately, they are quick in asking people to do certain things that is going to generate income to government, and they are not quick in also giving people the reward as a result of the kind of sacrifices that they are doing.
Okay, Professor Menoma, thank you very much. Let's go over now to Abia State, where we earlier introduced Professor Emmanuel Oshodoke, who is president of ASUU. Professor Oshodoke, we, of course, allowed the other guests to speak before coming to you. Would like you to weigh in at this material time. What's the position of of ASUU, or even your own personal opinion with regard to the rise in some of the charges payable, especially in federal universities?
Well, thank you very much. And this is what we as a union have been talking about in the past 15 years, that the need for government to properly fund the universities. And that's where we are now. The reality is coming down on the parents and Nigerian. You see, when you check today, you can go and check University of Lagos, what the federal government gives to University of Lagos per month for running University of Lagos with almost 100 something people in that university, students and staff, is just about between 11 and 12 million a month. Can that buy even fuel for the vehicles? But check what happened about 30 years, 20 years ago in the 90s, 80s. What was the government giving to education, giving to the University of Lagos? They have contributed with the trillion of IPs and this, what do you call it, TSA and what have you. They are strangling the university. And that's where we are today. So let me give you an example. Unilag get about 11 to 12 million a month to run. The second generation get about 8 million. The third one about 5 million to run the university in a month. So, but what the vice chancellors and indeed the whole university have done is to look for easy way to solve a critical problem by passing the bill to the students. And the implication is that more than half of our students will leave the system. Let me give you some statistics. As of today, we have about 48 federal universities. 68% of Nigerian students are in those federal universities. We have about 50 state universities. 26% only are in those 6 universities, 50 universities. Now we have 138 public universities with less than 6% of the students. So that gave you the implication that by the way we are going, in the next 1 or 2 years, if these fees or charges, whatever they call it, are allowed to remain, about 50% of our children, of our students, of our children will leave the system and they become crisis for this country. So what is the solution to this? It's very easy, and that's what we're saying as a union. Let the government increase its funding to education. When you check all the countries around West Africa, none give less than 50% of its budget to education. But last year, Nigeria gave 3.8% to education. That is the problem. Let the federal government prioritize universities' education and upgrade what it has been given to education as a percentage of the budget, as recommended by several groups. That is the way. Not going to charge a man who earns 30,000 a month, 360,000 naira a year. You ask him to pay 200,000, 250,000 as fee to his children. He will drive children, and they become a pool for criminals to harvest. So that's why we have been fighting for the parents, the children, the students. They keep abusing us. The federal government will not listen to us. They will hold our salaries and what have you because of this thing. And we are seeing the impact. And that is why today, when you can check around the world, no university can do investment again because of the TSA. And we are also talking, we have an agreement with the government. In those days, University of Lagos can decide to invest in properties, it can invest in anything and yield income to its university. But with the TSA, they have been strangled. You can't invest one couple. And that's where we are. That's what people say, allow university to run as autonomy. Federal government, you appoint the council. Give a fixed amount you budgeted, as you have those in budgeting, to the university and let it run on its own. And not be controlled by the office of the head of civil service, IPPIS, federal character, and what have you. That's not how university works in those days. And they don't even run that way all over the world. A vice chancellor got 11 million a month to run the university. He is invited 6 times to Abuja to come and do one presentation, not to other ministry. That money is gone. So that is what we as a union is saying. Let the university run. And federal government, do what other African countries are doing. Upgrade your budget allocation to the universities and to education in general.
Okay, thank you very much. And it's interesting that you talk about, given the universities free hand, that's in terms of privatizing them, and at the same time also asking federal government to provide budgetary provisions. I mean, when you privatize, you ask federal government to hands off. But I just like to ask, is it constitutional?
National Assembly?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
I said federal government fund National Assembly, is it not? Was it privatized? In the 60s, 70s, when they were giving their money to universities, were they privatized? There is a law that establishes how universities should be run. And I say, follow those laws. When check our constitution, section 8 was very clear that university is free. Go and check. University education is free. Primary free, secondary is free.
The argument again in some quarters will be that if you consider, yes, maybe budgetary provision for the education sector has not been up to international benchmark, but provisions have been made. I mean, provisions are made. And then the question is, to what extent, have the administrators used the provisions made effectively to provide those facilities, that are needed for students to use to pursue their academic studies?
I hope you heard me. University of Lagos, what they get per annum for running University of Lagos is 150 million to run Unilag in a month. If you divide that by 12, it gives you about 12 million per month, less than the salary of a legislator in 1 month. What would the VC do with that money? What? That's why I say, look, education is the key. Any nation in the world that I want to develop, education is the key. But here, we don't need to prioritize it. And why? What was the Western region giving to education in those days? 30% of the budget. So why are we coming to 3.8%? By the time we do this, one, you have quality universities that students can come from all over the world. Lecturers can come from all over the world. And not this thing we are trying to do. Once you mention autonomy, people talk about privatization. Is it correct? Does the federal government tell NTA how to run your program? Is it not? So what I'm saying, please, we should not be linking autonomy with funding. The autonomy we talk about is a law passed by the National Assembly and accepted by the president. We are saying follow that law. You can check the law. Any document, any letter coming from the ministry is null in the university. You can look at the law. When there's a law that will be passed, signed by the president, why would you talk about privatization when we mention the word autonomy? When there's a law, University Miscellaneous Act.
Professor Emmanuel Oshodoke, thank you very much for the very important points that you have raised. I think that it's also useful for our viewers not to get away with the impression that, say, University of Lagos, that according to you gets about 12 million naira per month, that money is not intended for the payment of salaries. Probably for the use on overhead.
I didn't say salary.
Yeah, no. I'm clarifying what you said, so that they don't get that impression that it's for the payment of salaries. It's probably most likely for the use for their overheads. We'll come back to you, but let's bring in again Professor Yakubu Ochefu. Professor Yakubu Ochefu, let's crunch this, because I recall a couple of years ago, if not last year, we had a conversation around the question of autonomy. And Professor Oshodoke touched on one aspect of it, that universities now are unable, that's federal universities, because of the TSA arrangement, unable to make their independent investments that would generate more revenue for them and enable them to take care of their internal needs by way of overheads, and therefore the complaints about inadequate funding from the federal government will not arise. That's one leg of it. But the second leg, you've heard the other guests on the program seek to justify why we should retain the existing regime of fees rather than escalate and then make the users pay contribution. Or, as Menoma was saying, to say, look, prorogue it, give advance notice, as it were, instead of just saying, look, 2 weeks to resumption, now you're going to pay 100,000 from, let's say, 15,000 or even 30,000. How do you crunch all of this? Is there something that we are missing out, or some persons remain fixated on the existing things that say, oh, government must bear government must bear this, government must bear that? And by the way, we also know that TED Fund continues to chip in the development of universities.
Thank you very much. You see, there are two sides to this debate and to the argument that has always been made. First of all, what is the value of education that we as a nation, as individuals, as parents, and as students put on that education. The second side is what is the philosophy of education, especially university education, at this stage of our national development. If you link the two together, you will then understand some of the points that Professor Sedeke has made, that the value of education, and by that value, the cost of education has not been properly contextualized going back in the last 30, 40 years, because it has been dropping significantly. The second side to it is, if you aggregate the cost elements in the university system, these are costs that must be borne. We call them user charges. And a critical part of these user charges has to do with overheads, running, maintenance, like I mentioned earlier, and these are costs that are not in the hands of the people who are running the university, So, for example, you have to pay Ikeja Distribution Company. They will give you a bill. If you don't pay, they come and cut off your electricity. Then you have to go and buy diesel, If you have the money to buy diesel, nobody's going to give you diesel on credit. Or if they give you credit facilities and you cannot meet up, they yank off those facilities. And the university must run. The average university runs for 210 days in a year. That is where students, staff, and everybody meets. The remaining days, the students are not accounted for. But even when the students are not accounted for, the university still has to run. It's a living organism that runs 24 hours a day, 365 days. There's no break in their calendar of this cost. So we have to come back to the legal arguments, to the economic arguments, and the broader context of how do we value education. You mentioned TED Fund. TED Fund is an intervention agency, and we have said it time without number, that if ASUU had not convinced federal government to introduce TED Fund, by now our public universities will have been in a sorry state. And so, as an intervention agency, TED Funds can only intervene in certain areas of the universities. They support the universities. But TED Fund is not going to give you money to buy diesel. TED Fund is not going to give you money to pay your electricity, and TED Fund is not going to give you money to buy cars for traveling of your staff. So staff have to attend conferences, seminars. Those transport costs have gone up. Universities have to meet them. If you send a staff to go and do an assignment somewhere, he has to stay in a hotel. His daily touring allowance has had to go up because the cost of hotel accommodation has also have to go up. Now, when you come to the question of investments and how how the universities can do businesses to improve their bottom line so that they can have money to meet some of these challenges, again, there are aspects of the law that need to be retweaked so that universities can make the type of investments that other universities in other parts of the world are making. So it's something that, as we have discussed on this program before, that we have to rethink the entire philosophy of university education. We have to rethink governance methodology of university education. We have to rethink the funding methodology of university education, and not just take it one challenge at a time. If we do that, we are going to be in this spell for a long time to come.
Thank you. You talk of user charges, of course, that will be borne by the students, and I'm just wondering. On the one hand, the federal government is cognizant of the situation in the country, and therefore, set out to find ways of softening the impact of fuel subsidy and the harsh economy on the people, on the citizens, and especially the vulnerables, by providing some form of social safety nets for them. And what the universities on its own, did is to turn around, rather than also consider a way of providing some form of palliative for the students. You are adding, the burden on the students. That's on one hand. I like you to look at it from that angle. Then secondly, The world, you talk about use of fuel, you talk about diesel. The world is moving away from all these sources of energy into greener sources. And it is from the university that we produce the skills and knowledge that develop these technologies. So why don't we also engage some of our students in those, departments and faculties that can, help to develop some of these technologies so that the universities can also use and move away from use of fuel and diesel.
Yeah, that point is very well taken. What the fact of the matter is that the user charges that we are talking about, federal government comes back and says for every 100 naira that you collect, 25 naira has to be remitted to the national treasury. That is also a consideration. So even those user charges that universities are collecting, federal government still goes back and takes a percentage of that. There are some vice chancellors that have now been dragged before ICPC and EFCC that they have, quote, embezzled hundreds of millions because they did not remit 25% of the user charge. And when you try to explain to members of the National Assembly that user charge is not revenue, it's a user charge that has to be paid for, they say there's nothing like user charge in their accounting system. So we cannot deal with this in bits and pieces. The investment that the universities need to make to generate 1 megawatt of electricity costs over 1 billion naira. The way aspects of the university law are currently structured, even the business investments from private sector to come and partner with the university to drive some of these transactions are not feasible because these are long-term investments. There's no university that can go into a long-term agreement with any investor for more than 20 years without getting the express permission of the of the visitor, which is president. And when you go to the process of getting these waivers, it's another story entirely. So the universities are open to business. They are looking for investors. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty of how business people do carry out their operations, how they look at their profit margins, how they look at their returns on investment, you find out that the universities as presently structured are not in a position to do the type of business that will improve the bottom line of the universities. So they are doing pure water, bakery, and things like that that have 5-10% return of investment. Is it 5% return on investment from pure water that you are going to use to build hostels, for example? To build auditoria, to build sports facilities, So yes, it is true that the universities have the capacity to aggregate the resources to provide electricity and to deal with some of these municipal services. The fact that the investment income, the seed money, is something that they are not able to achieve to arrive at, and even where they can raise that seed money, the laws, certain aspect of the laws of the university is such that they cannot go into very long-term investments.
Professor Ochefu, thank you very much. While we are still on aspects of this, I want to bring in Professor Menoma one more time. Again, as I said, is an accountant. Professor Menoma, the whole idea of an ivory tower was to often refer to the isolated nature of that ivory tower. But the gown now has to meet with the town to remain relevant. That idea has also been very well established. But to what extent can the ivory tower be isolated from the shocks in the town? We have seen sometimes very steep movements in the indices in the macroeconomic environment. These are the things that we feel, for instance. Indices, exchange rate, interest rate, you name it. When these indices are impacting on the prices of goods and services, and therefore utilities that even the ivory tower itself would use, then the user charges that we're talking about will not, as Professor Ochefu indicated, not remain static. So how do you explain this, therefore, that yes, you are seeing steep movements in the macroeconomic environment and everyone else is complaining, including the parents and guardians and sponsors of those who are in the universities, to say, oh, look, I had 1,000 naira in my pocket, say 1 year ago. what he could buy for me 1 year ago is not what he's buying for me today. Electricity tariff keeps going up. If tariff is going up in private residences and businesses and commercial entities, it will also impact the universities unless there's a special dispensation created for the universities. How, therefore, do we resolve this tension? To say, this is what is happening in the larger society, and then universities want to say, no, we are insulated, we are isolated, let the impact, by way of cost, not also come to us. You know what it costs you to fix your car today. You know, as Professor Ochefu was saying, you are sending your lecturers to go for conferences. Hotel accommodation that was, say, 10,000 a couple of years ago, if you probably somebody will be looking for a low-grade hotel where you don't want to send your lecturers to. Who then pays for this?
Thank you very much. You see, the real issue is that we are not confronting the issues as they are supposed to be. If you take the issue of isolation of the university community from the universities are supposed to also feel the pain so that they will now develop research areas that they can present on how to solve problems of society. And this is also a problem of society. So my take is that it is not about not allowing the impact on the university community, but it is about mitigating it also on the part of the owners of the university. So it is a fact that we go to the same market, and even if the market is within university, the product is going to come and people are going to purchase it, and all the other macroeconomic factors is going to affect it. So in terms of survival, the university community is not supposed to be isolated from that kind of distractions, if I may call it. But what is important is that government should also come in and make sure that there is a plan, there is a program to also say that as we are thinking of the larger society, what can be done to also university community so that those matters that can affect what you do is also reduced. And that is the point. So what if there is going to be increases in these amounts because of interest rate, because of exchange rate, because of that, government will say, okay, we know that this is coming. So we'll redo what we are supposed to give to you. And then incorporate this factor and make sure that they are still able to do their work without necessarily being jeopardized. The whole idea of allowing the university to say that they should now be the ones to cater for the increases that is not actually something that is not their own making, it is society
all right.
that let them now be the ones to resolve it by asking students and staff to pay for those services.
No, but Prof, you know, I mean, let's be realistic. Businesses that are privately owned are facing similar challenges. Some worst case scenario, you shed weight. You ask your staff to go home. Alternatively, you ask, again, as we are seeing now, ask some of your staff to work virtually, or you reduce your inventory, or you reduce even your capacity to produce. These are the reactions you get. If your price of diesel has gone up, and you ordinarily run your business, say 12 hours on diesel, you will say, no, now we run it on 6 hours. Yes. Businesses are taking such decisions.
Yes. Should we not?
Let him take the question,
yes.
please.
Those are business decisions.
Yes.
That you are making a product that is going to be it has a price.
Exactly.
But the matter in the university is an investment in human capital. That all you are trying to do is to generate people that are going to contribute to the overall development of the society. So what you are doing, it is not as if you are making expenses that you are looking for profit, but you are doing an investment that is going to improve the overall development of the society.
Professor,
so it is not a business approach that you're going to do. It is an investment approach.
Professor Mayurona, thank you. I was going to say that to Kingsley, that the analogy between business operators and the educational sector, I really find it, because this is all about human capital development, and this is for profit. You know,
no, hang on a second. Go to the international environment. Hang on.
If you are having
internationally, they also invest in human capital.
Yeah.
Take a scale of fees, for instance, in British universities. Those fees, the way they were 5 years ago, it's not the structure you have today. In fact, as Professor Menoma said, you would find that if you get in year 1, this is what you pay, year 2, this is what you pay, year 3, this is what you pay. The fee structure keeps going up because of the changes.
Yes.
In the US, these are advanced economies. Yes. They also respond to this shock. That's the point I'm making. Not that you be static and you say, oh, it's human capital investment. You pay from your pocket at some point.
Just before we take a break, let's Professor Mekudi say something. Again, in the wisdom of the federal government, the Loan Act, was set up to help students, offset some of their financial, especially students from indigent students, offset. Will this help to assuage some of those charges for students?
Absolutely. So I think that's what's important here right now regarding the fee regime they are talking about, even though there's no tuition fee being charged. So the government has realized that this is a problem. There's been a public outcry, and that's why they've come up with the Loan Act. Now, it came out, really fast because, of the outcry. So therefore, they've realized that there's some issues with it, and that is why they put a hold on it and had stakeholders come. Even the National Assembly had some stakeholders come last week Thursday to talk about that, act and the problems in the act. And I was there with Professor Ochefu on behalf of the Committee of Nigerian Vice Chancellors. And so we're very happy with the act. We think it will solve this problem completely. Why? Because it's there's no discrimination. It's available to everyone. However, there are a few inconsistencies within the act that we're not very happy with, which we brought to the attention of the National Assembly. And some of those include the membership. The membership is the CBN that chairs the committee. It's a committee. We don't want that. Why? Because he already has a lot of work to do. It's not a work. The Loan Act is not something that can be done by a committee. It needs an organizational structure. So we're advocating for something similar to TED Fund. It's an intervention agency, and sure, it should have an organization with its staff, especially because when you look at the nitty-gritty of the act, you'll see it provides that, when you make an application, within 14 days, you have to be told what the status of your application is. And within 30 days, you have to be given the funds. So how is it possible to do that as a committee work? It's not going to be possible. It's hands-on job. So we want something akin to the structure of TED Fund. And when you look at the membership as well, we think a body like the NYIC should be represented on it. And also a critical stakeholder, which are the students, are not on that membership board. This is very important so that you can have their own views and they know what's going on, and they can relate and inform their fellow colleagues what the situation is. Another issue is with regards to the guarantee, the guarantors system. It says you need to have a guarantor, 2 guarantors, a minimum of 2. How many people have access to judicial officers that they know that are willing to be guarantors for them, or lawyers post-10 call experience? Because if the person doesn't pay back, then it falls on you to pay back, and you have to pay back. That's
the sole point of it. Yeah. Does it really address the problem, or does it recreate the problem?
No.
But we'll allow you to respond again.
Okay.
When we come back. We just want to pay some commercials, and then when we come back, we'll continue with our conversation. All right, welcome back to the program. We've been having a heated conversation here in the studio. Of course, myself and Kingsley are, not agreed in one perspective, but that's just by the way. Professor Mekudi, you were going to speak on, how the students are expected to repay the loan. I understand that the loan students could access as much as 500,000. I don't know. Correct me.
No.
Yes, please, go ahead.
So the 500,000 you're referring to is actually under Section 14B, and it's a requirement, it's a condition saying if your family earns less than 500,000, then you can apply for that loan, which is also something that we're not very comfortable with. since Section 2 provides for equal access, then we believe that that should be taken out of it so that there's equal access, whether you're from a rich background or a poor background, as long as you're a Nigerian citizen and you want to access that loan for your education, higher education, then you should be able to do so. But what we are talking about, the guarantor system, is that the students were advocating for it to be increased, you know, for religious leaders and traditional rulers to be part of those guarantors, so that because they'll have easier access to them. However, what we're saying is we think insurance should take care of that. There should be an insurance system in place so that they insure that loan. And, you know, the students pay to them. If they can't do so, then that insurance company pays that loan back to the government. And so once the loan is insured, you have no business with that. Yes, and so you won't have any situation, basically, any other problems arising from that. But when you look at Section 6D, which talks about disbursement of the funds, it says the funds will be disbursed to the applicants. So the investors are also not comfortable with that, because when you give the money to the students, chances are very high that they may not even enroll. And we've seen that from some states that provide that sort of loan. So when they give directly to the students, they will use the loan for something else. But when a student applies for that loan and you pay directly to the university, then you're sure that the student is actually studying, that he's being enrolled to study, and that's what he's doing. That's what he got the loan for, and he's using the loan for what he applied for. So those are some of the things that we want, you know, to be straightened out. And there's also Section 16, which has to do with the application process. It's very cumbersome, and it's also still very quite, you know, archaic. It's relying on writing and applications and stuff like that. We think what should be done, a digital e-platform should be used, so that right from the, you know, beginning, the application, the disbursement and the repayment, it will all be on that digital platform. So it's very straightforward and it's very easy to look at.
So the loan scheme is in abeyance right now, or are the concerns that you as stakeholders and others have raised, have those concerns been addressed?
Those concerns are being addressed. Like I said, we were at the National Assembly on Thursday, and all the stakeholders involved were invited, and they all presented papers on that and spoke to those papers. So obviously with the increment in petrol fees and inflation, etc., rising cost of living, the government, you know, heard what people were saying and came up with this act. It's one of the fastest acts that came into being, and that's why there are a few loopholes in it. So when it realized, you know, that there were some issues to do with that act, it then put a hold on it so that all the issues can be ironed out. And that's why we had that stakeholders engagement, and everyone has given their opinions on that.
Okay, Professor Maigudi, thanks. Really, therefore, the act is in abeyance at the moment.
It's on
yes,
hold.
but you see, when you talk about the charges as well, it's not just, you know, that the universities rely on those charges or rely on the subvention. We also do other things to try to get.
We'll come to IJ. I'm just talking about the Students' Loan Act. I say that it's not been operationalized.
Yes,
right
not
yet.
yet.
That's fine. Professor Emmanuel Oshodeke, ASUU president, I'd like you to come in again against the backdrop of the plethora of issues that have been raised, including the ones that you also pointed out. In the past, there were scholarships. I wouldn't know whether those scholarships are still operational. There was a federal merit award system. Universities also had their own scholarships. At University of Nigeria, Nsukka, for instance, it was called Foundation Scholarship. And states also paid bursaries to students, and that was irrespective of academic performance. So we appear not to have heard so much about these other aspects, even though from time to time you do hear some states paying bursaries to students who are in some of the professions. What is ASUU's view with respect to the students' loan scheme once it becomes operational as part of the shock absorber to enable students as users pay for some of these fees that have been introduced, rather than, you know, calling on the federal government at all times to say, no, keep funding, keep funding. We know the federal government has to fund, but let somebody else also be a part of the burden. I believe that's the rationale. What is your thought?
Well, our view, we have made our view no long ago on this issue. This is the third time it's been introduced in this country. student union student loan scheme. This is the third time. The past two failed without any impact. The question we ask: what has changed? What has changed? What is in this one that will make this one to succeed? Two, you mentioned something very critical. You know, today we still have student union. You still have student loan. You still have student sponsorship. Can the son of a poor man get it? You can check. They're still there. There's still loans. Can the children of the ordinary Nigeria on the street get it? That is one. Two, let's look at this loan. What is the source of the funding? If the source of the funding is still from the government, why don't you make it a grant for the indigent student, not the children of the rich men? Because the way it is going, 80% of the students will not have any guarantor. They won't have a guarantor. So which means the children of the big men who have access to guarantor will masquerade themselves as children of the poor and get the loan, just like you are getting with the student scholarship. So what we are saying, look, this was when we ran into this similar thing in 1991 and then negotiate with the government, we said, why don't we create a special fund, tax company 2% of their profit, and use it to fund education? That originated transform into this third fund. And we're saying, if this money is coming from our, what do we call it, our national sources, why can't we do something similar? Because I can assure you, and I hope there's a difference, that those who are supposed to get this thing will not have access to it, because nobody will guarantee them. Two, when you look at the bureaucracy in Nigeria, you can check. Even a university applied to get 1 kobo from federal government, it takes 6 months. So if you look at the bureaucracy in Nigeria, the student apply through the student affairs, the director of student affairs, apply to the VC sent to the ministry to DC, it will take 2 years. When you look at our bureaucracy, two, very likely even the form of the children of the poor might not even go anywhere. So that is this country working. I want to tell us, please, let's be very fair as a country people. Which parastatal that we are running in this country that is probably the people that is working? We are a country that have a lot of crude. Can we refine it? Can we refine our crude? We are a country that have Nigerian Airways that were working properly. Do we still have Nigerian Airways? We have a country that was supplying electricity to people when we were small, free. Is electricity working as a public thing? What do you call it? The Ajaokuta Steel Company. Just name them. If they cannot work, why would make this one that involve money that people are so much interested in work? I see all sorts of people want to be board of the board of this thing. That's the project of some people want to be in the board. What is really this thing but want to be the board become a major thing? So what we are saying, let's study this thing very well. When you find out, once that thing was announced, universities started increasing their fare. People even wait for the implementation of that increasing. They their fees. So that is where we are. Universities increasing their fees today because they anticipate that thing is going to work.
Professor Shodoke, thank you. Let me bring in, they say the person that wears the shoes knows where it pinches most. So let me just bring in Tobiloba Samson, who is the President, Student Union Government of the Federal University of Ibadan. Tobiloba, I'm sure you've listened to the diverse opinions, especially on the issue of student loan, as a way of softening the impact of the charges, brought on students. Is that a relief? If not, how do you think that what can be done, to help assuage the hardship on the students?
Very much. Let me first quickly respond to, should I call it an allegation by ASUU president saying that the students were against them while they were on strike. I think singling out action of a couple of people to say students did not support ASUU movement is not right, because a couple of us were on the street to protest in solidarity with ASUU, and a good number of students were. So in essence, we believe that ASUU is speaking the voice of an average Nigerian, the poor, and we also identify with them. So answering the question, I think we are a country that is quite funny in what we do, because we're a country that has a good number of professors, a good number of people that are intellectuals, that even countries outside the world call on them to come and address issues. But when we want to do our things, we act like quack. Because if not, I don't know what is different about this new student loan scheme and how someone thought that this would work when we've had 2 previous ones that failed. In a country where nobody has job security, as a student, you cannot say for sure that as I'm graduating, this is the type of job that we do, irrespective of the course that you are saying. In fact, a minister for health once said doctors can be tailors or so. So you ask yourself, if medical professionals that are high priced elsewhere are people that are looking for other jobs in Nigeria, so where do you want people to get the money for them to repay the bill? And that's one by the side. Like Professor Yakub rightly said, I think when we look at the conditions around this fee, it's totally clear that is created to fail. Because how do we assess it? Let's even start from those that are going to be in charge of the money. Yeah, you said 1% of returns from crude oil and the likes, 1% of returns from Federal Inland Revenue, Nigeria Customs Service, and I think Nigeria, I can't remember the third thing. So all of this return comes, and the CBN governor is chairman of the committee that is going to be allocating it. It's funny. Then we move beyond that. We say, okay, what are the conditions for people to access this? You say people that their family earns less than 500,000. In all, no sincerity, do you actually think that if you earn 2 million naira in the Nigeria of today, you will be able to afford the Nigerian university? I mean, federal institutions. Because by the time you cater for your daily expenses, by the time you cater for other children that you have and all, I doubt if you have 100,000 naira for you to pay. But it is assumed that if you hear more than 500,000, then you are good to go. You can afford the fees of the institutions. So when we look at all of these barriers, it points to one thing: it is going to fail. So for us, and for me, I align with what Professor Oshodeke said. If this money is being generated the way we generate the TET fund, why don't we use it to support students as a form of grant? And sincerely, if this is done, if government can sincerely bring all stakeholders around and say, okay, what does it take for us to train a student as an architect? What percentage?
Tobiloba Samson would like to thank you for the points that you made. But I'm sure that there are some persons who will take exception to the use of the word quack in describing persons who are seeking to solve our national challenges or problems. Professor Menoma, we are already pressed for time. You heard what, and of course you will also be probably involved with this in terms of the students' loan scheme and how probably to amend and repeal and reenact and reenact it. They're talking about a grant. Now, we seem also to have, again, if saying that make it a grant rather than a loan, the tuition is already free. That's to say, you already have that grant from the tuition. And this is a loan. In other jurisdictions, students obtain loans. In the US, in Canada, in the UK, you obtain loans as a student, and the liability is yours to repay upon graduation. And that is not to say that they have 100% full employment in those jurisdictions. How do we get around some of these ideological issues that say something must, must not be paid for unless it comes from government?
I'd appreciate if you can just do it in 60 seconds, please.
No problem. The issues are straightforward. let all the variants be available. When I was going to secondary school in 1977, there was this system in Plateau State that a student will be given a form. You fill it with the background information. You don't even know what they are going to use it for. At the end of the day, some of us were exempted from paying school fees. And you are just given a form. You fill it, you say your background, what is it, and at the end of the day, you just receive a note from your principal that no, you don't pay school fees.
You have a waiver.
Yes, you have a waiver.
So conclude your thoughts, sir.
Yes.
Have to
So that's what I'm saying. That those things can also operate together. Those that critically need loan should be given loan. Those that critically need grant should be given grant.
Professor Mainoma, thank you. I'm sorry, I have to end here. Professor Mohammed Mainoma, former Vice Chancellor, Nasarawa State University, Kefi, Nasarawa State, and the Vice Chancellor of Prime University here in Abuja. Thank you very much, as always, for coming to share your perspective with us. Let us also appreciate Professor Aisha Sane Maikudi, Deputy Vice Chancellor, Academics of the University of Abuja. Thank you very much for coming to share perspective. Samuel Tobilaba Samson, President, Student Union Government of the University of Ibadan. Thank you very much for sharing your perspective. We also want to appreciate Professor Emmanuel Oshodeke, President, Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASUU, and Professor Yakubu Abuki Ochefu, Secretary General, Committee of Vice Chancellors of Nigerian Universities, and Secretary General, Committee of Pro-Chancellors of Federal Universities. Gentlemen, I'd like to appreciate you for coming on Good Morning Nigeria today. All right, Kingsley.
That's it for us on the program. Join us again on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Look after yourselves, but enjoy your weekend. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.
I'm Claire Adelabu Abdurrazak. Bye-bye and have a good weekend.